I knew what I was going to do a long time ago. Why am I not doing that? Why am I doing all this other stuff? I went and I got the degrees. I got a bachelor's in psychology. I got a good job, and I went back, got a master's degree in public administration, which I have zero interest in ever pursuing. But I have that. And so you put all that time in that stuff and you're like, but I know what I want to do. Why am I not doing it?
Welcome to the Author Like a Boss podcast, the podcast for indie authors who want to improve their writing, up-level their marketing, make money with their books, and have fun doing it. Now, onto the show with your host, Ella Barnard.
Hey, boss. If you are starting on your author journey but are nervous about marketing, then I've got something special for you. I've just released a book called Start Marketing Your Book. In it, I share fundamental marketing principles and simple, actionable steps that you can take right now. For less than a cup of coffee, you could actually have everything you need to start selling more books. To buy the book, go to authorlikeaboss.com/start marketing. Hello, bosses. Hello, everybody. We are here today. I'm really, really excited for this interview because we are here today with Scott Moon, and he has been writing fantasy and science fiction for over 36 years, which I have a hard time imagining because if you guys have seen him, he doesn't look that old. Like he started writing books when he was 3. When not reading, writing, or spending time with his awesome family, he enjoys playing the guitar, Brazilian. See, I knew I was going to screw that up. Brazilian. Well, it's also playing the guitar, playing Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Oh, I probably had a bunch of typos in there.
And watching movies. He's
but
a
I
dog
do just
guy.
Just like playing.
I thought I was going to mess up the jiu-jitsu part, but instead I just messed up the Brazilian part. Anyways, fan of the military, he's also co-host of the popular Keystroke Medium show. So that's the most important part, you guys. Science fiction and fantasy. He's awesome, family man, and he's a co-host of the Keystroke Medium show. So just ignore all my blibbles.
There you have
welcome Scott to the show.
There's Scott. He liked books too.
Yeah,
pretty much
what I just said.
That's pretty much my bio right there. I can really geek out about books, and you don't have to be a fan of books. And I'll go to work and people will say, "How you doing, Scott?" And I'll start talking about books, and I can see their eyes gloss over sometimes. Like, okay, that was probably more information than you wanted to know.
Oh anyway. Man, I think that's
anyway.
I think loving books is an excellent filter for finding friends. Like, I can't tell you how many times where I've been like hanging out at like a pub or someplace and got into a random conversation with a stranger about reading and books, and all of a sudden, best friends. Like, oh. You too?
Oh, yeah.
Me too.
There's nothing as cool as finding out you both have the same favorite book or something like that.
Yes.
That's the best.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Okay, so tell us a little bit. You guys, he's been writing for 36 years. So we want to find out, Scott, about your journey, your author journey. Where did you start and how did you end up here?
Oh, okay. So 36 years, that's starting from age 12. And that's when I decided I wanted to be a writer. And that's because, kind of jumping in the middle here, basically about that time, my mom, who was an English teacher, actually at the time she was a librarian, but she'd been an English teacher, a librarian, and then an administrator. But she said, we should write books for kids your age, because I was playing Dungeons and Dragons. I was reading lots of books and fantasy and stuff. And so we started writing this book. And basically I wrote the book, and then she read some of it, and we worked on it for a while, and then life happened. But I never quite gave up on the dream of being a writer. I immediately loved it. But before that, so skipping way back, as a kid, like in grade school, I remember very vividly like a parent-teacher conference meeting. And I remember them saying to my mom, well, it says he gets the right answers, but he just doesn't get done in time. And I'm not sure what they were saying. They're saying I was slow or something, but I didn't get great grades. So I'm like in 3rd grade going, I got a C grade. I'm terrible. I'm not smart. But the one thing they did always compliment was the story I'd written around that time. And so every time we had a chance to write a story, I'd write a story. And I always loved writing the stories. I hated being bored, so I daydreamed a lot. And then I just began writing. I was one of those kids who always wanted a blank stack of notebooks, or I wanted a journal, because I thought, I was it's so funny because my youngest son said the same thing to me recently. In my mind, I wanted to write a book. And so, when you're like 7, you're like, okay, well, this is a book with no words in it. So it's a journal. But you think that if you write that when you're a little kid, and then you can sell that to the masses somehow. And so I would always be trying to get journals and notebooks and writing stories in them and making things up and things like that. So that's kind of where I got my early start. And then after that, I would just write all the time. I always had a stack of legal pads. I'd write at my part-time jobs, or my part-time jobs, I guess. I worked at the movie theater. I worked at, Kmart, different places, and I'd always be writing in them. And I'd fill those up and then type them out, print them out on my dot matrix, eventually submit it for publication and whatnot, and then get rejected, because that's what you did for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's pretty much it. Basically, the short version of my writing journey is that I love to daydream. I love stories, whether they're books, movies, or whatever. And I can't help it. I literally cannot stop myself from writing. So it's like nowadays, you start to get a little bit of success, and then you start going, well, maybe I'm not doing as good, or maybe you have a slow week or month or whatever. But then you look back and realize that you've been writing your whole life for free, and that literally for, more than 3 decades, I was writing with nobody reading them at all. I mean, sometimes like I'd get my mom to read one, or maybe a friend, and then you feel bad because that's a lot to ask somebody to say, hey, sit down here for 25 hours and read this book.
Mm-hmm.
So I submitted a book to Daw Publishing House, Daw, it's
Mm-hmm.
fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically urban fantasy, but there was no urban fantasy designation at the time. And it's the book that eventually became Dragon Badge. And I sent that to them, and they sent it back, and they said, hey, the first reader, I guess that's the first part of their process at the time, liked it. And it's going on to round 2. And I was like high as a kite on that for like weeks, because somebody had not only read my book, but liked it. That wasn't my mom, And so it's neat. So
Yeah.
I guess
It's really exciting.
Yes. But nowadays you can get some people to read your books like instantaneously, with a little bit of tech savvy, a little bit of interaction on social media and stuff. And, you can easily at least have a few hundred people read your books right out the bat. And you can meet like a bunch of writers on our Facebook groups and shows, and listen to podcasts, and you don't feel nearly as isolated as you did back in the day.
Mm-hmm. That's so true.
In my opinion. So
agreed.
Anyway, I'm not sure where I'm going with it. I'm just kind of wandering around.
Okay. Well, I have a question for you.
Okay.
I have a question based on, so you said you can't stop writing.
Right.
Like you just couldn't stop writing. And then there was like a little bit of a hesitation or something now that you're making money. And I wanted to like dig into that a little bit with, did the urge to write change somehow when you started doing it, like, and putting it out there and making money versus when you were just doing it for yourself? Like, was there any changes? And if so, what were they?
Okay. So, at the beginning of that is, and when I cite starting when I was 12, at age 12 is when I said, I want to be a writer. That's my career. I want to make my living being a writer. So I've always wanted to be a full-time writer. I know sometimes as an artist, you feel like, well, if you're just doing it for the money, it's not legitimate and stuff. But I don't really see it that way. It's like everybody has to do something, and that's what I wanted to do. That's what makes me happy. Why not love your job? And, so I had it figured out from a very young age what I was going to do with my life. And then you go through all those things as you get older, and you're like, what am I doing with my life? And then you're like, well, I knew what I was going to do a long time ago. Why am I not doing that? Why am I doing all this other stuff? I went and I got the degrees, and I got a bachelor's in psychology. I got a good job, and I went back, got a master's degree in public administration, which I have zero interest in ever pursuing. But I have that. And so you put all that time into that stuff, and you're like, but I know what I want to do. Why am I not doing it? And so I started taking writing much more serious. I basically gave myself permission to say, no, this is serious. You can do this. There's nothing wrong with wanting to make money with your passion for telling stories. And then so since then, I've really let a lot of other things go and been much more focused, say the last, 5 to 6 years.
I think what you just shared is really, really important, because I think a lot of people, you're certainly not the only writer who was saying when they were younger, I want to be a writer when they grow up, and then somehow veered off track.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people doing that. And so what do you have, can you tell us like what happened to be like, no, I can do that? Like, was it just time, or was there some kind of an inciting incident?
Yeah, there's an inciting incident. Part of it is so I tell that whole story, and like as a tragedy that I got a day job, but having a solid job that you kind of like, and that takes care of you is actually a good thing for an artist, because you don't have to worry about starving to death. If I wanted to go, like I talked to Richard Fox, who's one of the writers I work with, and he always says, well, then I'm going to write my 800-page Napoleonic historical epic, because we all know that's not going to sell. Well, it might for him, but if I said right now, you know what, I just want to write stories about historical fiction in a really small niche that nobody cares about, and I could go do that right now, and I could still pay my bills because I have a job. Would I rather be writing than go to my job every day? Yeah, but having the best piece of advice I heard say in the last year was, I heard one of the writers we talked to said, live within your means. So if you want to be a writer or an artist or any of those things, the first thing you need to do is get your finances under control, and then don't spend money on things that don't advance your dream. You don't have to buy all the stuff that society says you should have to buy. You don't have to have a brand new car. You don't have to have all the brand new stuff. You can have nice stuff. Just my wife's a big fan of Marie Kondo, and she's a minimalist. Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of my answer to your question about what changed. And I'm not sure how that fits into my story chronologically, but I know it is a part somehow. But basically, she has something, I'll misquote it because I haven't read the book. We talked about
the life-changing magic of tidying up.
Right. Yeah, it's Marie Kondo, and it's minimalism. There's
it's a really good book, you guys.
Yeah, it's awesome. And one of the things it says is, don't have stuff that doesn't spark joy. Mm-hmm. And she's talking about stuff like, for example, I made my wife really happy the other day because I let her throw away like 15 of these T-shirts I had from the late 90s because I didn't wear them. They weren't really bringing us any joy, so we got rid of them. But I was keeping them for whatever reason. I keep T-shirts that just are getting dusty in the closet. But life's like that too. It's like, you volunteer for something. Like I volunteered recently to go help out with this video for some friends, and I don't want to do it because in a moment of weakness, I was like, oh, sure, I'll help you because I like to help. I'm a pleaser. I want to help people. But I spent all week just wishing I could not have to do it. Because it's fine, it's fun, but it's not my thing. Why am I doing something that's not my thing? And when you're a writer, you have to be on guard for that stuff all the time because writing takes a lot of time. So if somebody says, hey, you want to come to the lake and hang out with us? If you don't really want to go to the lake, you need to not go to the lake because that's going to be a whole day of nothing, no writing. And you're going to be, if you're me, then you'll be frustrated and resentful that you've wasted like 6 hours essentially doing nothing. And I like to go to the lake. So that kind of ruins the story. But the point is, does it spark you joy? And it goes to things you possess, things you want to try and do, how you spend your time. You have to be picky. Everything's an opportunity cost. So I could sit down and read a book in my genre because I'm feeling blocked, or I could play a bunch of video games that on the surface they feel like they're in my genre, but really all I'm doing is acquiring tokens. And you could do it asleep. And while I find that relaxing, that's not a good use of my time. I don't know. I'm veering off again.
It's okay. But you're veering off onto things that I think are really going to, like, I love it because I've read the book. Two, as I get older, I realize that, what happens when you're younger and you're like, people are like, time goes so fast. And you're like a kid and you're like, what? No, it isn't. It's so slow. And then as you get older, you're like, they were right. It is going fast.
Oh, yeah.
It really is going fast. And the older I get, the more deliberate I want to be about my time.
Exactly. Well, I remember I thought high school literally felt like 7 lifetimes, but now I think I could probably hold my breath through a 4-year anything.
Right. I know.
Because 4 years,
4
I
years.
look up, I'm like, man, I just took this new position, and it's like that was 5 years ago.
A new position.
Yeah. Well, it's like, for example, I was on the SWAT team for 11 years. And towards the end of that, I got promoted to sergeant. And I was driving home from work yesterday and thinking to myself, I've been a sergeant for 10 years. So I've spent most of my career now doing what I'm doing. But to me, it feels like I just started that part.
Wow. Yeah.
And
I know.
if you're not intentional about the way you live, things really rip past you pretty quick. So
yeah.
I really value that. And I really admire people that are really focused on what they're trying to achieve, whether it's developing a stand-up comedy routine or writing a book or even just being really good at the job they're at. Like I know several officers that are really working hard to be great police officers. And they're really focused. And it sounds interesting, but that's not as easy said as done, because it's easy to go there, make your calls, get through the day, because it's just miserable sometimes, and then go home and forget about it. But but you can tell the people that it's really their vocation and not just a paycheck. And I respect those people.
Yeah. I like to call it, I've been thinking about that this week. It's interesting about that. Doing something with excellence. That's
Right.
that's the way I think of it. I'm like, you can tell when somebody is doing something with excellence. My husband has a cleaning business. He cleans people. He cleans
Right.
businesses. He cleans stuff, but he keeps getting hired. And when I married him, I was like, wow, because when he cleans, he does it with excellence, and it turns like he'll detail your car and it looks brand new. Like,
Oh, yeah.
and you're like, oh, this is why. Like, I really respect it, even though cleaning's not my thing, but he does it with excellence. And now I have a huge respect for anybody. I just have a respect. So I want to get back though to, okay, being focused and getting things done. So what is your writing routine?
Okay. So this is a great thing. And of course, we're going to name about 20 books in here because so we got Marie Kondo's book. There's also one, I can't remember who wrote it. It's One Thing or The One Thing. But it's a book about, and if you just look up One Thing, I think you should be able to find it. But it's a book, and it talks about focusing on one thing and doing the thing that matters most first, and all that stuff. And so I'm a police officer, and we're taught from day one, you got to be able to multitask. You got to be able to drive the car. You got to be able to run the radio. You got to be able to look. You got to answer the calls. You got to listen to the dispatcher. You got to be thinking. You got to write. You got to document where you're going. You got to be looking right and left, head on a swivel. Watch. Make sure nobody's sneaking up behind you. Watch for suspicious activity. Always multitasking. And if you can't multitask, you're like a complete loser. But really, multitasking is a terrible thing for most aspects of life because you can really only do one thing. You're not multitasking. You're switching back and forth between tasks. So the book, The One Thing, got me on this. And then the other book is The Morning Miracle. I'm probably getting that title wrong, but everybody knows the 1 Minute Miracle, The Morning Miracle, has a similar concept. There's several books that cover this. And so I took all that and I read all those books and listened to all the audiobooks. And then I developed a routine that I do in the morning. And this serves me well. So what I do is I work 6:30 in the morning until 5 p.m., 4 days a week. So for me to get anything done, I mean, I could just write on my days off, but I feel like I got to do something every day or else I kind of lose the flow. Mm-hmm. So I get up at 3 a.m. And usually even on my days off, because it's extremely rare for me that I will get interrupted at 3 a.m. Sometimes it happens, sometimes, the dog eats a spider trap or something and I have to go deal with the mess or something crazy happens like that, but not usually. So 3 a.m. I get up, I eat something, I check my calendar, I try to read a little bit, and then I start my process. So my process: get up, eat, read, start writing, and then I track it. And so I try to do an hour to 2 hours in the morning. I exercise one way or another, and I go to work. And then if I have then I always try to make sure I have something to work on if I do get a lunch break, because by contract, I get a lunch break if I get a lunch break, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, yeah, you can have an hour if it's not too busy. I'm like, well, thanks for that. So if I get a lunch break, I spend it on writing or exercising. I try not to spend it just shooting the breeze with whoever, but I do a lot of that too, because as you can tell, I kind of chatty. But,
how much are you getting done during that time?
Well, and that's the thing, is my most productive time is the first hour. There's another book, and I should have wrote some of these names down, but it's like 1K to 10K words or something like that. It's written by a
2K
novelist.
to 10K.
2K to 10K. That's the book.
Yeah.
And she cites 3 aspects of productivity. One of them is like basically being organized, like having an outline or whatever. Another one is being consistent or something. But the one that sticks out in my mind is she learned that she has a sweet spot as far as the amount of time. So for her, writing for 4 hours, and that's what she said in the book, she'll get the most done per capita, I guess, if she writes undistracted for 4 hours. So there's like a critical mass. So like if you can work, like a lot of times I don't get to write unless I'm willing to do it in 5-minute chunks throughout the day. 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 5 minutes there. I'm standing in line at the bank. I use lots of apps. Like I have an app that will read stuff to me. So like I'm driving to work, I'll have it read me my first draft that I just worked on.
Mm-hmm.
So I write in the morning, do my exercise, get ready for work, drive to work, and listen to my story back to me so that I keep the story in my head.
What's that app?
It's on the Android phone. It's Read Aloud or at Read Aloud.
Okay.
And then
I'm going to put all of these in the show notes, you guys. So don't worry if we don't have any of the names of the authors.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm making you work so much harder than you probably thought you were going to have to.
It's fine. I do it for everybody.
Awesome. Sweet. So she said that there's that, and she tracked it. She tracked all this stuff. And she said, if I write for 2 hours, I make this many words per hour. If I write for 6 hours, I get this many. And if I do 4, then I get this many. And what her conclusion basically is beyond 4 hours, she started to see diminishing returns as far as word count production. And so several of these other books that I've cited to you and podcasts I've listened to, they also talk about that whether it's a creative endeavor or it's like a high mental function, you're good for about 4 hours. And after that, you just, whatever, maybe the glycogen in your brain's getting depleted. I don't know. Your synapses are fatigued. I don't know. You're distracted by Snapchat. I don't have any idea. But it really is. So basically what my takeaway is that you have 4 hours of maximum creative productivity a day. And it'd be best to do it first if you can. And then the rest of the day's a win. And then the rest of your day can go to complete hell. And you're like, man, I killed it this morning. I got the important stuff done. And like for me, I'm a much nicer person for my family and friends. If I have not written and exercised or worked out, then anybody who knows me knows, yeah, he didn't write or work out today because he's a real jerk. Because I just have no tolerance for anything. I'm so bent out of shape. But if I do those 2 things, I'm pretty nice, I would like to say, or at least nobody's told me otherwise. So,
and I'm not going to be the one to start because you're pretty nice right now.
Oh, good. See, I wrote this morning and worked out.
Yeah, I like the level. This is me, you guys. The level of self-awareness that comes from people who've made writing like a priority in their lives. Like the lady who wrote the 2 to 10K, like she measured to find out what worked for her. And here you are saying, hey, if I don't write and work out in the morning, then I'm not as good a dad. So everybody likes it.
Yep. Everybody wins.
Yeah.
So it's important. You got to do, and it may not be writing, but you should do what sparks joy. Back to Marie Kondo and all that. So you should be doing things that make you happy. You're going to have to do unpleasant things to earn a living, like, go to work at a job you don't necessarily like all the time, but nobody likes their job all the time. The best job in the world is not great all the time. you just make it as good as you can, as often as you can. It's my idea.
Yep. There are always going to be dishes, you guys. Even if you're there will always be laundry. So you're always going to have something that you don't necessarily want to do. So why not, in the times when you can choose it, choose something that brings you joy?
Exactly.
I love that. Okay. I want to ask you a little bit, though. I want to ask you about your writing process in terms of actually writing the stories. So can you talk a little bit about what you're writing and then how you're writing it?
Okay. One of my weaknesses is I'm always looking for the perfect process. And so what happens is I find lots of great writing processes and then I change them all the time. So I probably know one that would be good for lots of people because I've tried so many. But so what my current process right now is, literally today, I switched back to Scrivener. I was doing everything on Google Docs. And the reason I did that is I like to, first of all, I will what I call discovery outlining. It's like discovery writing. I'm not a huge outliner because I feel trapped by the outlines when I get there. It makes it feel more like work. And sometimes the outlines can be a problem, but they're also really good for discovering the whole story from start to finish. I'm really comfortable with just sitting down with a blank document and just going for it. But what that causes is sagging middles and weak endings, too many rabbit trails and stuff. So what I do now is I get my premise. I try to maybe write like a 1 or 2 or 3 paragraph summary, or maybe I just think it while I'm driving to work. And then I beat out an outline of somewhere between 60 and 99 beats or action steps, and they're short. They're one sentence and not a long sentence generally on a beat. So a beat might be detective goes in a squad room and discovers a crime, or so-and-so is given a case that he doesn't like. Bob's partner is a jerk, and that might be a beat, and you have a bunch of those. And I so I do my outline and then I start writing. Sometimes I use voice dictation. Sometimes I just hand type it into a draft, and then I make my phone read it back to me when I can't be writing. And then I go through and I revise heavily. I don't usually show it to a lot of people because, one, everybody I know is writing their own books. They don't have time to look at my 35 drafts. Right?
Yes.
And I'll send it out. I have some beta readers, bless their hearts, who do a great job. But mostly when it comes to my process, I used to rely on professionals because, like, if I send something to BZ Hercules, my main editor, or Ellen Campbell, or Laura, they will get it done on a certain timeline. Mm-hmm. They'll say, okay, I'll have this back to you in 2 weeks, and then I can schedule it and get it done. Whereas a lot of times beta readers, they have lives. They have lots of other people want them to beta read for you. And, I've had beta readers send me stuff back like 6 months later. I'm like, I've written 2 books since then. But then I've had several lately, though, that like I will send them something and they will have it done by lunch, And I'm like, wow, you're way faster than me. So
maybe you just hadn't found the right beta readers yet.
Right. Well, yeah, no, because there are definitely, like, if you talk to like Craig Martell, I've worked with Craig, and when I send him a story, at least 3 of his main beta readers will be done with that story by the end of the day, with comments and suggestions, and all that stuff. So it just really depends. You need to foster. If you find somebody who's a good beta reader, a good proofreader, anybody who's willing to read your stuff back to you or read it and get it back to you, definitely cherish them and buy them dinner or something.
Yeah.
Do something.
Love on them, you guys.
Yeah, love them. Keep
appreciate them a lot.
Yeah. So my process is outline, write a draft. I would like to tell people to write all the way to the end and then start, but I always say that, but I never do it. When I get stuck, I go back to the beginning of the story and I read it from the beginning to where I'm at. And that's where the reading app helps, is because the first 3, 4, 5 chapters, that's easy to do. When you get to chapter 37, it's hard to start to read all the way from the beginning of the story, unless you have something that can basically read the story to you almost constantly. I like that. That works for me. If I take good notes, that can alleviate some of that. But that's why I do it. I like to work from the beginning as much as possible. I just feel more confident, I guess.
Yeah. The reason I ask about that specifically is because, I have the Author Like a Boss Facebook group. And when we invite people to join, we say, what's your biggest writing challenge? And the number 3 biggest writing challenge that I saw is that people getting lost in the story.
Right.
Like in that saggy middle part. And they but they're good enough that they can tell it's a saggy middle. And
right.
So they're like, shoot, how do I fix this? And so, I want to ask a little bit about what does the writing app do for you? Or the read aloud app. What does that do for you? Yeah.
Okay. So 2 things, and I'll talk a little bit about Richard Fox's process because people may find some value in that. And I don't think you'll mind. So remind me, please. So the reading app, the read aloud, what it basically does is if I start, because I don't do it as bad now, but before I started meeting lots of other writers and indies and going to conferences, the wisdom seemed to be you couldn't revise too much. It's kind of like drinking water. You can never drink too much water. And so I would revise 50, 100 times. Oh. And what happens is you get 3 chapters that are revised 100 times, and then you get the last 17 that are revised like twice because you're exhausted by that time. But so now I'm not as bad. But the point is that I've read it so many times that I will skip words that I think are there but aren't there. Psychologically, your eyes will fill in the blanks, and the reading app, the read app will not do that. It reads every word or lack of words, and so it's really helpful for getting some of that. But also, it's just fresher. After I've read a chapter 10 times, the passion for that chapter is dead in the water. You're like, oh my God, yeah, I get it. I've read this chapter 10 times. Yeah. So the reading, it's like a change of pace. Somebody does some of the heavy lifting. And one of the reasons I use it is there's a book by Sol Stein, S-O-L Stein, who's a writer and an editor. And he said that when he was going to school for writing, they had the famous editor in New York City who would make them read their stories in an absolute monotone, no emotion, no inflection, no speeding up or slowing down, and that the story, the raw words with no emotion in them, had to convey the emotion in the story.
Ooh.
Because, like you ever heard, like I love audiobooks. So like I have several narrators, they could read me the phone book and I'd be like, what comes next?
Yeah.
But these apps are very robot-like and they don't give you any emotion. And so you can tell the cadence of you can tell if your sentences are too long. You can get a general idea for where it's pausing and stopping. Every now and then you can laugh because they pronounce words funny, or you realize you wrote a wrong word that it pronounced correctly. But it's really good. And I think that the apps are really, having a robot read you your book is excellent because there's no cheating. If your sentence is way too long, you're going to go, when will the sentence end? I need to go back and fix that sentence. So that's
because they're completely objective. They're not.
Yeah, they don't care.
They're not trying to make you happy. They're not trying to. Yeah. And do you then get inspired to? Do they also then inspire you to keep going or finish your draft or what have you?
Oftentimes, and by them kind of lacking the emotion, a lot of times I've been stuck. And I'm like, I got to get these words in. I'm way behind on my deadline. And then I'll listen to it on the way to work, dreading what I'm going to hear. Cause I'm like I'm so over this story. I'm a terrible writer. Why am I doing this? Who am I kidding? And stuff. And then I'll listen to it. I'm like, hey, I like that. Oh, that was good. Or conversely, you can say, yeah, that's got to go. But usually what it reads back to you is not anywhere near as bad as you think it is. And it's just, I've heard somebody else talk about that at a conference, that a lot of times as a writer, you get to the point where you hate everything you've written. There's a phase for that. Everybody knows it's a writer, but usually it's not as bad as you think. And having somebody else read it back to you sometimes is good.
Like in the moment. Have you ever gone back and read something that you wrote a while back? Like a while back, and been like, hey. Yep.
It's like it reminds me of like a comedy or a sitcom or something, because you'll do that, have that exact reaction. I'll be like, hey, this is great. Oh, I love it. And you're cruising along and you're going at full speed. And then you hit that part that is really bad. It's like you're wrecking your bicycle on the side of a house. It's like, okay, yeah, I need to work on that part. But yeah, there is no better feeling than going back to a story that's 20 years old and going, oh, I love that.
That came from me. Whoa, I'm not bad.
Maybe I should keep doing this. Oh, okay, I'll write one more book.
One more book. So you wanted me to remind you about Richard Fox.
Okay. Richard Fox, and I think Josh Hayes, my other Keystroke Medium partner, does this a little bit. He writes character arcs, one arc all the way to completion. So I work with Richard Fox. We collaborate. One of the first steps in our process is he sends me a detailed outline. And that will be the entire book, roughly in order, because he'll move things around to make them fit. One of his strongest suits is he's good at pacing. And I think that sells books, because people don't want to be bored. But he'll have like 4 main characters or 3 or whatever. And once he's kind of got that outline, when he writes them, and I try to do it similarly, is then he'll write like one of his characters is Ken Hale, is a Strike Marine team unit commander or whatever. He'll write his entire story, and then he'll write all the scenes for, one of his other characters. And then he goes and he puts them all together. Now he already knows he already knows the whole story, but when he comes down to writing the outline, he writes one at a time, which I think is good. And so, which you had mentioned in this podcast and a couple others I listened to that you were doing with other authors about writers that are getting kind of lost in the story. Well, this makes it much smaller chunk. So it's easier to get all the way through that story arc without getting lost. And then when you get tired of that one, after you've revised it 100 times, you can switch to a new character and sometimes kind of get a second wind, and you can get theirs and then, put them together. So some version of that process might work for a lot of people. Is
that what you're doing?
Yeah, I do that, but I'm like that dog over the hedge, like play squirrel, and off I go. But
no,
yeah,
but we want to know, because you guys, if you want to listen to the other way, the way that Scott is talking about, you can go listen to Josh Hayes' interview, and he'll tell you that way. But what's your way, Scott?
Yeah, that's yeah. I try to do it that way. And when I'm working with Richard, it's easier because I will kind of write his sequences out like that. But even when I'm working with his, I may do that for a while, but eventually I have to listen to the book all the way through in order, just to get that kind of 10,000 feet view of the story. Yeah. I get that gestalt impression of the entire storyline, the mood, I guess. But I really like. There's another book by Stephen James who talks about it. It's plot trump structure is the name of his book, and he basically advocates not outlining. He advocates starting from the beginning and then just saying, what would this character do if this happened? What's at stake? What's the worst thing that could happen to them? And then you naturally grow the story from the beginning. And he says, go back to the beginning and work your way to the end. And I think when you read his books, you can tell that's what he does. I think his beginnings are way stronger than his endings.
I think when you've been writing for a longer time, and you've been writing for a while, you get a little bit more freedom, because it's like knowing the rules before you break them. Mm-hmm. Some people, they don't have to write outlines anymore because the story structure is in their bones now. Like
Exactly.
they're like, I know exactly how this, like Richard Fox, I'm sure does not even have to think about, he's not like, what's my story structure? Like, I'm sure it's in his bones. He just comes up with the idea and it naturally goes into, he probably speaks in story structure. Have you ever met people, met people who you're like, I'm pretty sure they're speaking in paragraphs to me.
Is this the midpoint? This is the midpoint. I think this is the second door of no return in this story. The hero's journey. Yeah. It's like he's refusing the call. Tell him to stop refusing the call. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I think would be great for people who are getting stuck is to write simpler plots. What gets me the most confabulated is, since I will chase all the rabbits, I will have stories with 20 characters and they're on 5 different planets, and it that makes it overwhelming. I think if you simplify what your book's about, I have a note on my wall right now that says your book can only be about one thing, and that's from what's it called? Blueprinting the best-selling novel or something like that. The blueprint. But that particular author is really big on that your story is really only about one thing. And,
like what?
It could be like a military sci-fi venture might be, it's at its root, it's about, saving the galaxy and earning the respect of all your peers. And that's what it's about. All the other stuff is different variations of that, or like a romance might be about finding this relationship, the happily ever after, and stuff like that. So I don't 100% agree with that, but there is some value to understanding that the books can't be about everything.
Well, especially if you're distractible. So right, if you can, exactly. if you're distractible and you're like, okay, let me go back to the one thing, probably instead of 20 things, you'll end up with 3 or 4 things.
Exactly. Yeah. If you aim for one, you're going to hit just the right amount.
Yes. Knowing yourself, you guys, knowing yourself and how you write is very valuable. So so you don't say 3 or 4 things, because if you say that, then you're going to end up with 8 or 9 things. So you say one thing. One thing.
Focus. I'm
a huge advocate of knowing your process and then tricking yourself.
Right. What I got to do to hack through this one and get to the next thing. Yes. So.
Okay, so how now did you meet Richard Fox the same way, like through your keystroke medium? And can you talk a little bit about your show? Because just in case everybody's not listening to all the episodes.
Right. So I remember it like it was yesterday. So I literally can see down to the lighting quality of the time, and Josh and I have known each other for a while. We both work for the same department, but one time he says, "Hey man, can you want a 43?" And that means meet up. And I said, "Well, I'm getting gas." So I'm over at our central maintenance facility, fueling up my squad car. He comes rolling in his squad car, and we pull car to car. Cops always go car to car where they're facing opposite directions. And then the game is to get as close as you can without knocking the mirrors off. And so then if you get a hot call and you have to tear out of there, that's when it gets scary, because you're trying to take that mirror off as you're going to the hot call. But anyway, so we go car to car, and he says, "You got to listen to this book called The Amber War." And I'm like, he knows I love audiobooks. And so I'm like, okay, I have a credit for my account. I'm going to listen to The Amber War. And I listened to it, and I was just blown away. It was so much fun. It's the big thing. And I've been reading lots of books I thought I should, and I was not having fun reading. And I read that, and I loved it. And at that stage, we hadn't had hardly any guests on our show and stuff. So when a little while later, I'd now read 4 or 5 of Richard's books and listened to them, I would buy the Whisper Sync. So I'd be reading it on the ebook. And then when I couldn't read it, I would listen to it, and it would sync up, and I'd drive and listen, and then I would stop and read, so on. But then he's like, "Well, we're going to get him on the show." And then we got him on the show, and I was like, "That's amazing." And we always kind of like an after show where we talk a little bit more and kind of get to know people, and we kind of bonded, started talking about kind of some similar shared experiences in kind of the military law enforcement type similarities. And eventually the conversation came around that we could work together. and we started doing that.
How did you get him on the show?
I think Josh just emailed him.
Said, hey,
yeah. And there, because we have I think we have 300 shows now, or it feels like 300. Not some of them are repeat guests, but we have 3 years worth of shows going on. 3 years worth of shows, and usually we get people because what's a good example? We'll interview somebody like Richard, and then he'll tell his friend, "Hey, these guys aren't jerks, and they'll make it easy." We have lots of pretty successful authors on the show who'd never done an interview, and you could tell when they first come on the show that they are nervous because they're thinking high school speech class 101. This is going to be humiliating. These guys are going to ambush me and ask me a bunch of questions. And they're going to call me names and throw poop at me or something. But that's not what we do.
It feels like beforehand, I think it feels like, oh, this is like public speaking.
Right.
And then you get there and you're like, oh, this is just a conversation.
Yeah, we're just going to talk and we're going to say silly nonsense that makes really no sense and then move on and it'll be great. So, so that's how we met Richard. And then there's some that we just knew, Josh really wanted to get Peter F. Hamilton on the show. And so he basically emailed, went through all the links you could find online, eventually got a hold of Peter's assistant, and he came on the show. And we couldn't believe it. I didn't know what to do with myself. I was like, I don't get nervous super easy in this setting anymore, but I was nervous for that one. And then we got David Weber on the show, a few other people like that. And, they're more than happy to talk to you. It just usually comes down to, do they have the time for it? Mm-hmm. And they're getting bombarded with all kinds of other requests to be on shows or people asking them to help them with their writing or just be straight fans. And so they're busy. I get it. And I don't expect them to drop everything and give me their time. I think that's a huge compliment. But it's really neat when they do. Dude,
that's how I felt about you.
Yay.
I was like, Scott, man.
I'm totally pumped to be on the show. I remember hearing it and I was like, and when I emailed you and gave you I said, hey, I really like your show. And you're like, well, you can come on the show. And I'm like, really?
Dude, no. I'm going to go through all the Keystroke Medium authors. That's I have a goal. I'm like, I got to go. Through all these guys and invite them all to the show because you guys are so
We definitely
great.
Love to talk about books for sure.
Yeah. And I keep thinking because I'm like, I haven't made as many jokes as I wanted to on this episode. And I feel very proper for some reason. I need to be proper around you.
No, you can make some jokes. Just say, shut up, Moon. Okay. I need to make a joke.
Because I'm going way back to the beginning, way back earlier in the episode when he was like, sorry, never mind. I'm like, you made a comment about, I just got to go beat it out. And then you actually talked about beats. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, that was begging for a joke.
I was oh man, I can't say this.
What's worse is I go to work and I remember getting out of academy and they're like, yeah, the beat officer for 23. I'm like, the beat officer? Why would you ever be called a beat officer?
But then you actually talked about beats, and I was like, oh.
Okay.
He was talking about something completely else.
Yeah. Okay. Reel it back in. Yeah. We have in our after shows. I'm kind of known in our Keystroke group for making just some really awkward jokes that usually don't, thank God, make the prime time. But yeah, so joke away. I get so intense about some of these writings. Sometimes I feel like I'm being too intense, but I'm so excited.
No, it's great. You're passionate about it, and I really love it. It's just and you're making me laugh, but you don't laugh as much as I laugh, which is one of those things where you're on podcast and you it's like. Anyways, sorry guys, I'm veering off track. So Josh just asks people to be on the podcast. And that's kind of or to be on your guys' show. we have a chat group through Messenger with everybody on the show, and we'll be like, hey, who's got somebody who wants to come on? So and so talk to me about this. Today, Casey Azell, you should get her on the show if she
She writes a bunch of stuff for Chris Kennedy, and she's got some great books out there. But her book, Minds of Men, I think was nominated for a Dragon Award in historical science fiction or alt history, I think it is. And she just messaged me right before you rang me to say we were ready, that several of Chris's authors that he publishes have been nominated for various things at the Dragon Con or Dragon Awards, whatever. And said, we should have a show and have a bunch of these people on. We could all talk about that, all these nominees. I'm like, hey, that's a great idea. I would love to do that. So now we just got to schedule it. And, because she's been on the show like twice and had a good time. And she tells her friends, hey, this is good. You'll like it. So that's our biggest philosophy on the show, is to make people feel comfortable, and we want to be good hosts. And the guests are supposed to have fun or be relaxed or whatever. And that's just what we aim for. And it usually works pretty well. It's getting people to come on.
And the reason I ask about this is because a lot of the authors that I chat with and that I coach, they're really nervous about reaching out to other authors but every successful indie author I've talked to has made it not in a vacuum. Everybody's made it with the assistance of, or at least cheerleading from other indie authors. Nobody's doing it in a vacuum on their own.
No, it's much more fun nowadays when you can easily meet other authors, and you can meet them in a environment that's good for you. You don't have to go out and meet them face to face. A lot of us authors are introverts. I'm actually an introvert, believe it or not. I'm kind of like a hyper, what do you call it? Overcompensating introvert. Is that a thing?
I don't know. It means that you talk a lot.
It means
Is that what you're saying?
I can be in the right circumstances. I can be loud and boisterous and stuff, but my natural proclivity is definite wallflower. I'm like, yeah, I'll just be over here. You guys go do your thing. So, but it's easy. It's a lot easier online to meet other authors, and you talk about books or whatever. Just so you don't feel like you're literally spending your whole life in my case, a grungy basement writing books.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And then it happens. So you've met these other authors through your show. And now through the show, you were co-writing with, who are you co-writing with?
With Richard Fox is one, and also with Craig Martell. So if we're talking about meeting people, I'll tell you a funny story about meeting people. So I go to the Smarter Artist Summit 2017, I think it was the year. And I went down there and I was going to meet Richard Fox face to face. And we're going to talk about this collaboration face to face for the first time. I went down there and I met Richard and whatnot. But as I was standing outside the conference room or whatever, talking to Richard. We're going to go have lunch. And then he's like, well, I think Chris Fox is going to have lunch with us. And Chris, anybody who's into indie writing knows Chris Fox is a big deal too. I'm like, oh, that's great. And he's like, you want to come? And I'm like, yeah, I want to come eat with you guys. And then I'm standing there and they're like, and I remember telling him something about I wanted to meet Joshua Dalzell because I knew he was at the conference. And if you've never met Josh Dalzell, he's really tall. And I'm standing there looking around, and then I say something about Josh Dalzell, and he was standing right behind me, like literally like looming over me, like, Chewbacca or something. And he's like, yeah, let's go to lunch. And so I went to lunch with these guys, and it was like, it's amazing because at that time, especially, still now, but at that time they were so far above me as far as their success as indie writers. I mean, they're like icons of indie writers in science fiction, middle science fiction. And they're like, yeah, let's go to lunch, dude. And we went and had a great lunch. It was fun. We talked a lot about cars and stuff because Dalzell's into hot rods and things.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so you just meet people and it was easy. So
yeah,
got to show up.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And a lot of people are really generous. Like I interviewed Chris Fox, and I was like geeking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, and he's so nice, and he knows so much, and he's very much a software engineer.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm like, he's not babbling; he's just getting right to the point, and then he's done.
Yep.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you, can you tell us an obstacle or challenge that you faced in your journey to be an author?
I'll tell you the biggest, most personal one. How's that?
Yeah.
Okay. We could go back and go through all the other ones, but the biggest, most personal one is because it's my own fault. But I came to a point where I had now decided, yes, I'm okay. I feel like I don't feel guilt for doing this passion of mine. And I am going to commit myself to it. I'm going to let some other things go. I quit a bunch of other things professionally, extra stuff I was doing, extra units I was on. I was in a garage band with some buddies, and I let that go. And I made all the commitments. I focused on my one thing, and now I'm going to do this. But the problem I was still having is I was projecting guilt onto my family members. And so what I mean by that is I would go downstairs to write, and I would have to stop after about 10 minutes because I would hear somebody make some noise, or it would be almost dinner time. And then I would go upstairs and I would sit there and just be attentive to them because I felt like they were mad at me for disappearing into my hole to write. And they were totally okay with me being down there writing, but I was projecting that onto them. I was like, well, they obviously think this is not important. I'm sure they're resentful. They're probably wondering why I'm down here so much. And then I would go up there and be pissed off at them for taking my writing time. Well, and my wife said, go downstairs and write. And I'd go downstairs and write for 20 minutes, and I'd come right back up because I felt guilty. So that was a really big obstacle, and it was all internal. I projected those thoughts onto those other people. And as long as you're fair and clear, then you'd be surprised at how easy that one is. Because basically I had to say, because people say, well, do you want to go out and have ice cream with, the kids and the in-laws?
Mm-hmm.
And I would always say, yes, of course I want to do that. But if I'd been honest, I would have said, no, I want to stay home and write.
Mm-hmm.
And so whose fault is that? Is that their fault for asking me to go eat ice cream, or is it my fault for not being honest? So sometimes you have to go spend quality time, even if it's not perfectly scheduled for you or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. But sometimes if you don't honestly say, okay, I really want to write for 4 hours a day. And in my head, even now, I'm like, they will be appalled that I would want to write 4 hours a day. What kind of sane person wants to sit down and do that for that much time every day when they're already doing everything else? But are they appalled? I don't know. I just assume they are. I'm projecting onto them. So I'm getting all psychobabbly and stuff.
Listen, you're okay with that with me.
Awesome.
Because I'm thinking like, also, I had some times where I'd get overcommitted to a bunch of things, and I was like, right. I want to do 100% to whichever thing that I can commit to, which means I can't commit to as many things because I can't commit to all the things. And then I'm less resentful because I have enough time for all the things that I need to do. I'm not resentful of, I got to go do this other thing. So, and it probably, again, makes you a better dad and a better person when...
I sure hope so. And all the help I can get, right?
I'm sure not. I'm sure you sound like a really good dad.
Except when your computer's not working or something and I go into one of those, my computer's broken moments.
Yeah, my husband has those as well.
Fun for everybody.
I think all guys. I think there's a thing where like the computer.
Yeah.
Okay, so what advice would you give to other authors who want to be successful?
Okay, so first of all is give yourself permission to be successful. I'm a big believer in. It's like a Tony Robbins thing. I'm trying to think of the term, but basically it's like over deliver. Massive action. So if you want to be a writer, I would recommend going all in and writing as much as you possibly can. But you need to focus on the first thing. First thing you have to focus on writing. But if you say, I'm going to kind of write a book someday, then you're not going to, don't then keep it as a hobby. So I guess maybe the first thing would be decide whether it's a hobby. Hold on one second. What? I can't hear you. In a minute. Okay.
Literally
Sorry.
5 minutes.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah. He wants a chicken patty. So I says, "Can you make me a
Cute kids on
He's
the
like,
side.
Can you make me a chicken patty?" I'm like, "I can't hear you. I got headphones on." He's trying to be polite, but I'll make him one here in a little bit. But so first decide, is this a hobby or is this professional? If you're going to go in, be very focused. Don't chase trends. It's okay to write to market, but my take on that, because Chris Fox knows is very knowledgeable on that. My take that is, and I think he would agree with this, is find something you like that sells, or that people will buy, and then know that genre as best you can. Don't ever write in a genre just because it's selling, even if you kind of like it. You really need to love it. You got to, if you're going to spend hundreds of hours on writing a book, you better love that story, because nobody else is going to. So, keep it simple. Know that everything is an opportunity cost. Does spending 3 hours a day on your newsletter in the early stages of your writing career matter? No, you do need to have a newsletter, but it's not something that you need to be working on constantly. You have no books written yet. Do you need to spend a lot of time on social media? No. It's a good place to interact with people. It's a terrible place to sell books. So I guess the main thing is make choices, make sure all your choices spark joy or advance you towards your goal. Like, what's my next action step? Like, I've started at ground zero. I have no novel. Make a list. What's the first thing I need to do to get this book finished? I need to develop a concept and a premise that I'm passionate about, that I think is interesting. So then I come up with the idea for the book. What's the next thing I need to do? And you go down that list, and you always do the most important things first. You give yourself large blocks of time, as big a blocks of time as you can, uninterrupted, for writing is good. But, when push comes to shove, if you have 15 minutes and you think you can write for 15 minutes before bedtime, then do that. So that's my big thing is if you're going to be a writer, do it because you love it. Pick the genre that you love, and understand there are a lot easier ways to make money than writing. I really think that if your main goal is to make money, don't write. You can make money writing, but it's a good way to ruin your relationship with writing and stuff like that. And that's not a popular message, because you go on Amazon and you're going to find 150 books or how to be a 6-figure author writing 10 minutes a day. I'm like, that's all bullshit. And don't do it. So that's my big thing.
Yeah.
Only do it if you're really willing to put in the work and you love it. So that's kind of harsh. Is that harsh? Am I being a downer?
No. I think it's real. I think it's real, because it is. I started a business last year, and I'm like, I'm all in this business, and it is still like it. It's because I love it that I can keep going. It's because I'm super passionate about it that I can keep going. But I have friends, like, I thought I like baking as well. I really like baking. But when I thought about waking up first thing in the morning and baking every day, I was like, this is going to ruin pastries for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I'm not going to like cookies anymore, so I'm not going to be a baker. So I get it. Do you need to go make a chicken patty right now?
No, I got a gaggle of other kids here that I think he just asked his older sister to make him one. So
okay.
I guarantee my kids are not starving.
No, I'm sure they're not.
We got more than enough junk food around here to keep them alive until, I don't know, 3:30 or something.
Okay, so finally then, can you tell us about your book, your latest book, and where people can find you? And I personally think you should write some books about writing books, because I love this interview in terms of...
Lauren Moore is one of our editors and a big fan of Keystroke Medium, and Josh and I have been working with her a little bit to kind of try and encapsulate some of the wisdom or shenanigan-like wisdom of Keystroke Medium.
Yeah.
And we're kind of working on something nonfiction in that Lauren's going to do most of the heavy lifting on that, but we're working on that.
Ooh.
Ooh. I think it'll be fun. That comes back to imposter syndrome because I'll be like,
dude,
does anybody really want to know what I think about how to write a book? I mean, I don't know.
I do.
Well, good. I'll send you an advanced copy.
I do. Yes. Oh. So anybody does. There's at least one person. Okay.
There we go. See, it's worth doing.
Yep. Yeah. No, because I think you have a lot to offer. So okay.
I definitely have no problem talking about it. As far as my fiction, I don't really know what book to talk about. So I will talk about
which is doing the best.
Well, my best collaboration right now is Rage of Winter, and it is part of the Terran Strike Marine series. It's the book 2. So the Datari Salvation is book 1, Rage of Winter is book 2, and they are part of the Terran Strike Marine series that I'm writing with Richard Fox. They're set in the Ember War universe, but they're standalone novels. If you read his Terran Armor Corps series right now, my books go kind of hand in hand with his, but they don't require each other's to make sense.
Okay.
But if you read them both, you get a lot more out of them, but those are the ones I write. And so Rage of Winter, I just completed, it's out there now. I just completed the 3rd book, and it's called Valdar's Hammer, and it is off to Richard. I sent him the 2nd draft a few days ago, and he's going to do his magic and send it off to his double, triple round of editors. And then we'll get that out here, hopefully not too long. The audiobooks, very excited about this. They're doing Podiums are published for audiobooks. They're doing a publisher's pack of the Datari Salvation and Rage of Winter as a twofer, and it should be out in early September. And it's narrated by Luke Daniels. He's doing it now, so that's
my gosh,
super exciting.
So much fun.
Luke's one of the guys we had on the show, and it was a blast. We had him doing these Caragol aliens and Elmo doing dialogue back and forth and doing Shakespeare, in Elmo's voice. Is hilarious. So
oh my gosh.
He's a very good narrator.
Awesome. Okay. So exciting. And you guys, I want to encourage you to go check out somebody who's been daydreaming for 36 years. His books are going to be fun. So, where's the best place for people to find you?
I think the best place is to go to our Keystroke Medium Facebook group. Mm-hmm. And because that way we can then you don't have to just meet me. You can meet all the other people there, and Josh and Chuck and Ralph and all that. Or if you want to get a hold of me, scottmoonwriter@gmail.com is one place. I have several emails, but you can email me there.
Okay.
Or I have a Facebook group that is the Scott Moon group or something like that.
Yeah. And he has a website, scottmoonwriter.com.
scottmoonwriter.com. I have all that stuff on there. It's good stuff.
So if you need just one that will link to all of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
www.com, scottmoonwriter.com. Boy, I'm a babbling.
Okay. www.scottmoonwriter.com.
That's it.
And I'm going to finish this off by saying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the way it's supposed to be pronounced.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you everybody for listening. Scott, thank you so much. This is my kind of conversation. I hope it wasn't boring to everybody else, because this is the kind of, I'm like, it's so meta, but I love that.
I know. I could go on for great time. I could go on for hours.
I hope other people got value from it like I did. Anyways.
Thanks, Ella.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody here at Author Like a Boss. Hey boss, you made it to the end of the episode. You're the best. Because of that, I'm going to give you a special invitation to find out more about the Author Boss Academy, where I and a bunch of really awesome authors hang out, have fun, and get stuff done. If you end up joining, tell me the secret word and you'll get a special bonus. Find out more about the Academy at authorlikeaboss.com/academy. The secret word is nipples. Hugs and happy authoring. I hope to see you soon.
If you love the Author Like a Boss podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes. Until next time.